Okay, so I've recorded myself creating this render right here, and what I'll do is just kind of go over the recording process. I've cut it into the pieces that matter the most, and I'll just explain what I was doing each step of the way. Yeah, so let's just get into it. I didn't show it on the video here, but I did start with an idea in mind. I'll just find a picture and put it up here when I edit this, but this was the inspiration right here. I think it was an AI generated thing, maybe a combination of two of them. And yeah, so I had an idea going into this, and that's why I was able to just jump straight in and start doing stuff without like experimenting too much. I kind of just went straight for the thing that I wanted to make. So yeah, I started with some pillars from my asset browser, which I already made a while ago. So I think these ones right here are in the fantasy asset pack. You can just use any pillars you want. This isn't like a pitch for the course or anything. So I'm just dropping that in. The reason I'm using this is because I actually use these models in my work all the time. But yeah, I'm just dropping in a bunch of different pillars, and you'll see me pick the ones that I actually want to use in a second. But the main thing is just getting some kind of shapes to start with, so I don't have a blank canvas. I just have some pillars in there. I didn't use them straight away, but I'm just starting to model a basic roof kind of shape, and I'll bring those pillars in a second. But you can just see me doing basic modeling here. I've got other videos on my exact modeling process, but it's the same kind of techniques that I always do, just taking basic shapes and just kind of slowly morphing them into something a bit more complex, adding loop cuts and extruding certain parts in, and just adding detail that way by just kind of doing basic edits of extrusions and insets and bevels, just duplicating the geometry, bringing it down, just kind of this section I kind of filled it out with some brick type things. I guess they are just bricks, I don't know, but you can see it's just a cube duplicated a few times, and then just throw a bevel on that, offset them a little bit so that there's some unevenness in the wall, and then I could just use that piece and duplicate it around. You'll see me in a sec do that. So just kind of adds a little bit more variation. Same thing on the corners, and I'll bring it back into the actual model in a second. But so yeah, you can see me just kind of throwing that in there just to kind of fake, I don't know, more detail, making it look like there's some bricks that are kind of poking out here and there. Like this, yeah. Not a huge detail. You can barely see it in the render probably, but it's in there. Here I just joined all of those pieces together. They were all separate until I was done with that single chunk, and then I joined them all together. And now I'm bringing in one of those first pillars I started with, and just using that to kind of fill out this structure that I'm making right here. And again, I do have a reference for this, so I'm kind of just copying the rough shape of like a building in a picture that I'm looking at. Not the exact shape, but I'm just using it to roughly plan out where I'm putting things. And that way I'm not just going in blind. It's just, I have like a very clear sense of direction I should go in at this point. Here I'm just bringing in more pillars, duplicating that main chunk I've already made into the lower section, just kind of moving pieces around. So this is usually how I model. I bring in pieces I've already made, and then combine that with maybe one chunk of a new model, and then that gives you a whole new structure, and maybe you can save that as a new piece to your browser or not. It kind of just depends on the project. So after bringing in a few new pieces and duplicating them around and then kind of forming a base structure, here I'm just bringing in a texture, doing some basic edits of like just moving things around just to finish this. I don't know, just making it better. Again, just grabbing pieces of the mesh, dragging them out where they need to be dragged, just to make everything kind of fit together a bit nicer. Yeah, just nothing like crazy going on here, just moving pieces around to make it fit, basically. And once I had a structure like this, I just took the camera and kind of moved it into the rough angle I know I wanted. So you can see I just put it to 35 millimeters right there and moved it off to the side a little bit. And I'm just, again, duplicating even more pieces around the structure just to make it a little bit more complex and kind of fleshed out. But again, I do have the basic lighting and basic camera angle idea at this point, and that gives me some ideas of where to place objects now, and it's a bit clearer where things should go. So there I just brought in some water If you haven't seen my video on making water, basically you just make a water shader once, save that to your asset browser, and then drag it in anytime you want. You could just save the material by itself, or just save the object like I did here. Right there, I just went into Quixel Megascans and brought in some cliffs. One of them spawned in kind of clipping through everything, and it actually looked kind of cool having it right there, so I just left it there. And then there was this other smaller rock that I brought in that I duplicated around a few times just to add, I don't know, some rocks here and there, just to make everything kind of feel a little bit more natural. And then here I'm just grabbing a texture for the ground plane, and yeah, just exporting that. I didn't show it on camera, but I also brought in the displacement map, turned on adaptive subdivision, enabled displacement right here, and that's how you get like you get to like poke through the water like that. I actually switched the texture right there, but it was the same process, just a different material. Here I just used geoscatter to click one button and then add grass all over. I was actually having some problems with it, so I actually switched that over to botanic grass. I'm actually using botanic here also for the trees, so I think it ended up in the end being all botanic. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing where you just click a button and then it scatters grass all over. And then yeah, just kind of spamming some trees around wherever it looks good. I think there's only 2 tree models in here. I did bring in a third one later, but you don't need a ton of different trees to like make it look like you're in a forest. You just need like 1 or 2. Kind of duplicate them around, rotate it around. Here I'm adding a sky, so I have a video on skies. It's just a picture of a sky that I took, put onto a flat plane, and then you just run that into the emission, and then the base color. Sometimes the alpha looks cool as well, if you run the color into the alpha. And then volumetrics. Usually I'll do that earlier, but in this case, I just didn't do it till this point here. So just a cube, display as bounds, add a volume scatter, turn up the anisotropy, turn down the density, and then just, yeah, scale that up over the whole scene. And there you go. It's a little bit thick. I think I reduced the density a lot more later in this process, but here I'm just trying a bunch of different things, like messing around with different lighting setups, spotlights, sun lamp, sky texture, environment textures, different sky images for the background. But I'm speeding through this part because it was just a lot of experimentation and trying things that didn't really work. And just kind of random edits that I've already done a bunch of times, like just moving objects around, switching the texture, nothing that complex or interesting. And just, yeah, trying a bunch of different lighting setups just to see what might work. This actually took quite a while of just trying different things. It's worth noting, I'll just pause here. It's worth noting that at this point, and in actually a lot of my renders, there comes a point where it feels like very hopeless, and it feels like I kind of get these thoughts in my mind, like, what if I kind of can't make anything good? Maybe that sounds kind of funny because it's never like been an actual problem, but it is kind of funny that like I do still get the same, I don't know, I feel the same like pain of making art that I think most people feel. There's points in this that aren't fun, and there's points that are like just feel like a full-on grind of like just trying to get something that looks good and kind of hopelessly struggling through this process. So it wasn't like that the whole time in here. Sometimes it is like that, but there's pretty much always a point where you're like, this is terrible. It's never going to get finished. I'm not even good at this at all. What am I doing? And then you get through it, and then it's like, oh, I made something cool, nice. And then you repeat the process. But it was at this point right here where I was feeling like this is not going to get done ever. So yeah, if you feel that, just know that like I think that's a very normal feeling of like, I don't really know what it is, but like hopelessness or just the feeling that you aren't good at this halfway through, and then you just push past that and then you get it done and then it's all good. But yeah, here just again trying different skies. There I switched it over to botanic for the grass. Right here I just took the entire main structure I made, moved it all up, and then took all the bottom pillars, went into edit mode, grabbed the bottom vertices, and then just pulled them down. For that to work, you need to have the setting correct face attributes turned on. And then yeah, here I'm just duplicating that whole structure that I made, a bunch of times around the whole scene, and it just kind of makes it feel like instead of just this one building in the middle of a forest, it's kind of this whole complex sanctuary thing that we're in the middle of. So it's kind of an easy way to just make it feel like, I don't know, more depth, more dense. So yeah, at this point, I'm just trying a bunch of different lighting setups still because I still wasn't happy with exactly how it was looking. And right here, I'm just bringing in a tree from Munich Office. If you just go on ArtStation and search for Munich Office, you'll find these trees. You can get them up for like usually a couple of dollars, and they're like really high quality. They're a little bit too high quality sometimes to the point where it lags your scene, but just something got to deal with. So I'm just dragging that in, kind of stretching it out a little bit on the base, and then just putting it at the top there. Here, what I'm doing is taking an ambient occlusion node. If you check these two boxes, inside and only local, and then turn down the distance to like a really small number, like 0.02, like I'm using, and then take a color ramp and actually flip it around. That's how you get, it kind of isolates the edges of all, like the edges of your mesh, and then you can use that to like create an edge wear effect if you kind of just mix in some noise like I'm doing here, or even don't mix in noise. You don't always have to do that, but I just did that here and it looks kind of cool. But that's how you can make the edges a little bit brighter by kind of mixing that ambient occlusion into the main color, and just kind of manipulating the values that are getting mixed in. So that's how I'm doing the edge wear effect there. And then I'm also using another ambient occlusion node later down the chain to just add regular ambient occlusion. Right here, I'm just taking another tree, kind of just throwing that into the foreground just for more, I don't know, leaves and stuff in there. I kind of jumped a bit here, but just dialing in last settings for like the daylight kind of thing I'm going for here. Switching the sky, and I'll show you the finalized settings I use for the lighting and world here. So this, I'll just pause it. This is the final sky texture that I ended up using. So if I mute this node right here, and if I deleted this, it would be pitch black in the whole scene except for the sky in the back. So it took me a long time to just go through a bunch of different options and try a bunch of different, a bunch of different spotlights and a bunch of different, sun lamps and sky textures and environment textures and all these different things to arrive at this solution right here, which is very simple, just one node right into the world settings, which is just, this sky texture right here. The intensity is quite low, so it's actually not that low. 0.5, so half of what it is for default. It's still really bright though, because the sky texture is just super bright for some reason. The elevation is really low at like 4.6 degrees, so that just means that like 0 is like the sun is going to be fully on the horizon, and then it's just 4.6 degrees up from that versus like 45 degrees at like, I don't know, peak daylight. So it's kind of cool having it at a low angle sometimes. And then what happens if you put the altitude up really high and then turn the air down is it kind of just gives you less ambient light from the sky, like less blue light coming in from the sky. And it just means that it feels like a bit more stylized anime kind of thing a little bit, where it's like you've got really bright sunlight, a little bit of ambient light from the sky, but it's almost like a bit more similar to a sun lamp where it's just the direct light from the sun and a little bit less of that blue coming from the sky without getting rid of it completely. So it's still there, but just kind of looks a bit cooler in some contexts. But yeah, that's what I'm doing for the sky. So just a basic sky texture basically. And then for the actual sky image on the back, it's just this right here. So there's these extra nodes, this hue saturation. Ignore that. It's not doing anything. But yeah, it's just the sky picture going into the base color, and then also the emission. And then I also turned down the alpha a little bit. And that just means that the opacity is going to be a little bit lower, and then it's going to blend into the background a little bit nicer. Here, I'm just bringing it through Photoshop. So just doing my usual process of, adding a bit more glow, haze, making some areas brighter, making some areas darker, and then running all that through the camera raw filter. I have other videos on my channel showing my exact Photoshop process if you want to see the in-depth version of that. But yeah, it's basically just like grain, sharpening, clarity, increase saturation, mess with the colors a little bit, maybe a bit more contrast, and then done. And then final curves layer just to kind of beef it up a little bit, a color lookup table, and that is the final result right here. So yeah, hopefully that was useful and it inspires you to make some, like, I don't know, structures or temples or this kind of thing, or I don't know. I think the coolest part about this was how I could just use like really basic modeling, basically just taking a cube and like adding some extrusions and bevels and turning that into like a full temple. Like you can see here, I really did not do much modeling. I know some of the pillars I modeled in previous projects, but just bringing in some basic models like that, and then yeah, adding a bit of variation by just adding some extra platforms, putting it into like some nature assets, like just adding some rocks in the sky. You can really do a lot with that, and hopefully that shows you that, yeah, this doesn't need to be anything that crazy, you know? So yeah, if you found this video useful and you want to go even more in depth into this kind of stuff, there's a link to a course below with that just is my full creation process, extremely in depth. It also comes with a bunch of 3D models that I use in my workflow, like you saw here. If you're into that kind of thing, link below. Other than that, yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you in some other video. Bye.